Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Colonel and Priscilla blame Larry. In the last few episodes, we've been taking a deep dive into a meeting that's happening in Elvis's bedroom in his house that he leases on Roca Place in California. Elvis has hit his head. He's recovering from a concussion. This is 2 or 3 days later. The Colonel has laid down the law. Hi, Keith. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Marion. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And we're going to continue this story right after this song, Threads and Dreams.
He wore a yellow shirt, black pants in the sun, rode horses through silence, then golf carts for fun. A ranch just 10 miles from the mansion's bright gate, where the myth met the morning and time learned to wait. George fixed the brickwork, the pipes in the ground, lit VP on shirt where no spotlight was found. Donna kept diaries, snapshots ahead of a father who labored, of a myth made by men. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place to be still when the world spun around. In the hands of the quiet, in the stitch of a scene, he carried the weight of a half-finished dream. The holster was worn, the leather was cracked, BP etched in thread, no glory attached. Mike shaped the saddle, the belt and the Lord, so Elvis could ride through a myth he adored. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place singing still, that courage spun out in the hang out the fight, the mistakes on the sea. We drained the weight of the hurts and his teeth. Snowstorms in March to fairgrounds at night. He chased peace in motion and shadow and light. And Priscilla saw him silhouette aglow, breathing in twilight, steady and slow. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne, just laughter at breakfast, a place to call home. In the hush of the ranch, in the hands of the crew, they found what was real, and he gave it to you.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're hearing about Colonel and Priscilla blaming Larry. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Keith asked, are there any facts on what Larry Geller did to describe why he was not liked by the Colonel and Priscilla? Well, I don't know about facts, because those are hard to come by. But I've got people's opinions, and we're going to see some of those today, starting with Larry Geller himself. Got a calendar up on the screen so that we can remember Elvis had his accident Wednesday the 8th, late at night or early in the morning on Thursday the 9th. It looks like we're going with Priscilla's account because we don't really have any indication that she's not there. We don't have any hard facts that she's not, and her story places her there. And she says Elvis fell in the bathroom early in the morning of the 9th, about the time he would normally get up. She heard him in there. She ran into the bathroom, pulled him out to the bed, or he got up and walked to the bed. But by that point, he had a serious knot on his head. He was complaining about it. She called Joe Esposito. Joe Esposito called the Colonel. Colonel came. Either he brought the doctors with him or he called the doctor. Doctor brought his nurse. They called in a specialist, the radiologist. They x-rayed Elvis's head with a portable x-ray. They determined he did not have a skull fracture. He has a concussion. They said he needed 2 weeks of rest. One studio executive or press agent for the studio, someone that was a spokesman for the studio, indicated that representatives of the studio, who would most likely be studio executives, people who interacted with Colonel and Elvis, they also were there, and they witnessed the injury that Elvis had. And now we're a couple of days later. Peter Goralnik believes this happens on Saturday the 11th, this meeting in the bedroom. We have one unverified source that states that Vernon flies into California from Memphis on the 12th, the following day, Sunday, to be present at the meeting. Obviously, that can't happen if the meeting's already happened. That source also indicates Priscilla is flying with Vernon from Memphis to California. However, it's unverified. It's from a fan summary out on the internet. So a lot of that fan summary did come from verified sources that I recognized. They didn't actually list any of the sources, but I recognized the facts and where they're coming from. But this one I don't recognize. So if you happen to know anything about Vernon being in Memphis at this moment and flying to Hollywood to be part of this meeting, as well as Priscilla, and where that is sourced, that would be awesome. Make sure you leave it in the comments. And the Colonel, during these meetings, he's laid down the law. Everybody's getting a pay cut. I don't believe anybody actually gets a pay cut. I don't think that ever actually goes through, but everybody believes they are. And everyone believes Colonel's got the power to make it happen. Second thing he lays down, Joe Esposito is in charge. Marty Lacker was co-foreman. Basically, he's demoted. He's now in charge of special projects, which is the wedding. So everyone in this room, they know that Elvis is getting married. It's part of the plan. And the third thing that the Colonel does is he outlaws the spiritual quest. He doesn't want any more books about spiritual stuff being brought to Elvis. He doesn't want any more spiritual talks with Elvis. He doesn't want Elvis's mind to be cluttered. And the people we believe are in the room from our investigations together, some we know, or we have to believe are in the room based on their own accounts, and the fact that some of them agree with each other in portions of the account, or that we can't prove aren't there. But there's another section of people that we believe are there because we think they flew there from Memphis with Elvis, so it would be logical that they're there. And then there's a couple of people at the very end of the list who have talked about this day, somewhat placing themselves there, but they haven't actually verified they're there, and nobody else has mentioned them. So, but we believe there's 14 people there. Maybe 15 if Vernon is there. But 14, Elvis, Colonel, Priscilla, Joe Esposito, Larry Geller, Billy Smith, Marty Lacker, Red West, Charlie Hodge, Ray Sidon, Gigi Gamble, Lamar Fike, Sonny West, Richard Davis. So we have reasons that we believe that they're there, but we can't be sure about anybody, I guess. But this is what we're thinking so far from the episodes that have come previously. So if you missed those, and you're wondering, how does each of these people fit in? Be sure that you go back and watch those replays of those older episodes. And while you're there, give us a like, subscribe, and tell everybody you know that loves Elvis Presley all about Hillbilly Cat history, so that they could join us here and hear these stories with these facts all put together in a way that they never have. So Clam Bake is marking the end of this era for Elvis Presley. This is really the last movie that he's doing before he goes back to the Circle G. And he comes back out of the Circle G right after his wedding, really, after his honeymoon. And he's going to be recharged with a new energy. And he's going to be able to take advantage of this 68 special that suddenly comes up. He's going to be able to turn this Christmas thing into what is now known as his comeback special. But let's take a look in a little more detail at the last item on this list, spiritual isolation. The Colonel saying, I don't want him reading any more books. They clutter up his mind. Here's what Larry Geller says. He says, Colonel Parker turned his cold gaze on me. And Larry's talking about in the meeting. They're all in the bedroom, these 14 people. Colonel Parker turned his cold gaze on me and said, and some of you think maybe he's Jesus Christ, who should wear robes and walk down the street helping people. But that's not who he is. I don't want him reading any more books. They clutter up his mind. We've heard in past episodes Larry say something similar to this, and that Colonel said something similar immediately after the doctors and the studio executives probably right after they left on the 9th, that he had taken them out in the hallway. So it's possible those people were still there even, but that the colonel had taken them out in the hallway and chewed them out and told them that they basically had been irresponsible. And when I say the colonel took them out, neither Marty or Larry details who all is taken out in the hall, but it's possible everybody that was there, which is possibly 11 men, because that's the number of men that the colonel is addressing during the meeting. And we get to that number because the colonel made a statement, according to Priscilla, that Elvis can't be taking on the responsibility of 11 people. That it's hard enough to be just Elvis. And we determined, or I determined. So if you guys ever have an opinion that differs from anything that I'm saying, feel free to put it in the comments, put it into the chat. Let's talk about it. You have sources that clearly rebut or mildly rebut, or maybe just would have us look differently at the situation. Feel free to let me know what those sources are. Good chance I may have them. I got a pretty good Elvis library, fairly large. But it seems to me that in this moment, the colonel, he's not happy with any of these people, but he's very specifically not happy with Larry. And Priscilla says, the colonel said, I don't want him reading any more books and getting involved in things that clutter up his mind. It seems fairly obvious that the colonel must have said this line about clutter up his mind, because it's repeated by Larry more than once, and it's also being repeated by Priscilla. And the chances that Larry and Priscilla agree on anything, again, that's very high. It's like as high as Billy and Larry agreeing on things. This is profound that they are using what's virtually the same language. They're both attributing it to the colonel. Larry says, throughout Parker's tirade, Elvis never looked at me once. Now, some people might interpret that to mean that Elvis did not support Larry. Now, this is 2, maybe 3 days after Elvis has been hit on the head, and he's been diagnosed with a concussion. A concussion, as we've seen a definition from, I believe it was Google AI, I think that Chillin in Canada brought into the chat a couple of days ago, that it causes a lot of confusion and inability to think clearly, causes your eyes to look sunk in with big black circles around them, causes you to have a hard time concentrating. Larry, in a past episode we saw, described Elvis in this manner during this meeting. He's propped up in the bed on the pillows, and he has this kind of look on his face, and Larry believes he's drugged. I think there's a pretty good possibility He's got some pain medication for the head because that big knot must hurt. There's also a possibility he's on some sleep medication. He historically has problems sleeping, has historically taken sleep medication, and now he medically requires sleep. I think there's a good chance he's not paying attention. He's not hearing what's going on. Larry interprets this as Elvis is either drugged or he no longer supports Larry. But he's not sure. I think Priscilla interprets it to mean Elvis does not support Larry. And the Colonel must be thinking the same thing. Now, what we don't know is what the Colonel and Elvis discussed in their private meeting before this group meeting occurred. It feels like the Colonel would have told Elvis everything he was going to do. What's not as clear is if Elvis could have put up any fight about it, or if he even understood clearly what was going on in the moment. If it was more than, say, a dream to him in that moment, or if he was part of the strategy, and these were pieces of his will that are being done, that he agrees with what's happening, we don't know. We know he's present, but we know that his state of mind is very potentially compromised. And Larry's indicating that he's not acting like himself, but Priscilla doesn't seem to have as much of an issue with that. And Priscilla says everyone from the entourage to film crews was aware of a change in Elvis's personality over the years he'd studied with Larry Geller. Elvis's vibrant personality was now passive, and he was becoming more introverted. The person most concerned about this change was Colonel Parker. Priscilla's telling us that she has seen a change in Elvis's personality. She herself notices that Elvis isn't the same. He's not acting the same. He's not treating people the same. He's not doing the same things since he's been studying with Larry Geller. And that would have been a few years now. So over the last few years, she's saying that Elvis has changed from whoever he was a few years ago. And she's saying that this isn't just her. Everyone, from entourage to film crews, from inner circle to the professional circle, people who know Elvis, they're all saying, according to Priscilla, he's not the same. Now, are they all really saying that? I don't know. She doesn't really back that up with any people that are saying that. That's, a verbal or a wordy way to add weight to a statement or a belief that is truly Priscilla's. She believes Elvis is different. Now, she's in a good position to make that judgment. And we have to admit, she was very close to Elvis during those years. We could debate how close, but she's got to be at least as close as Larry Geller. And she's noticing changes in Elvis's personality. She apparently feels those changes are for the negative. Other people might think they're for the positive. Priscilla goes on, and she describes exactly what she thinks the changes are. Priscilla says Elvis's vibrant personality was now passive, and he was becoming more introverted. So I guess she's saying that Elvis was keeping more to himself. I think perhaps she's referencing the time that he spends reading. In other portions of her book, while she's talking about the spiritual quest, whatever it is that Elvis is looking for, he attempts to share that with her by sharing the text that he's reading. She's not interested in it. She tries a little bit, but she's not interested. And so his reading has now become introversion, and she thinks it's not good for him. And that he's a passive person where before he was active. And it's funny, at the moments where she's already at this point in time, they're engaged to be married. She has accepted his proposal for marriage. He's going to become her husband, and she's describing that he's become someone that she doesn't like as much as she did a few years before. She's blaming it on this one person, Larry Geller. But in this moment in time, when she's about to marry him, she's also revealing that he's not the Elvis that she wanted to marry. He's the Elvis that is now. But he could be the old Elvis if they could get rid of this Larry Geller. And that in a moment in time when Elvis is purchasing the Circle G and he's building this dream of his for them together. He's building this dream there, and shortly afterwards they're going to be married, and they're going to spend this honeymoon at the Circle G. She, of course, doesn't know the future yet, but I mean, I think she's already guessing they're going to spend some time on the Circle G for their honeymoon. She's saying that he's very passive. So he's doing all these very active things. He's out on these horses riding around. He's refusing in many different ways to come out to California and film Clambake. He's not as active as he could have been in the refusal, but he's fairly active in it. I think the whole Circle G thing is Elvis trying to recapture or reassert his independence and his agency. And perhaps other people see him at this point in time the way that Priscilla does, that he's passive. And maybe that's part of why he's doing this thing with the Circle G. People are around him are seeing him as passive. And Elvis is very intuitive about things. Maybe he sees how Priscilla sees him. And that she has this feeling that he's becoming introverted. Now, of course, she's written these things years later. So perhaps this is her looking back, but she's saying at this point in time, he was not the person that he was, yet this is the person she's going to marry. She's also saying that these things that other people have noticed, as well as her, about this passivity and introversion, the person most concerned with this is Colonel Parker. Now, that seems far-fetched. It doesn't seem far-fetched that Colonel Parker would be very concerned about any effect Larry Geller would have on Elvis. That seems rational. But the fact that Elvis is now more passive, well, according to the myth, the Colonel wants to be in complete control. So passivity on Elvis's part would be exactly what he wanted. So in that case, he might be very in favor of Larry. And introverted means Elvis will stay at home more and not get himself into trouble in the outside world. So again, I think, according to what many people believe about Colonel Parker, that would fit in with what he wants. So he would not dislike Larry Geller. But the person that's actually most concerned about this introversion and passivity is the person that wrote this book in this passage, and that is Priscilla Presley. She's the one about to marry Elvis. How could the Colonel be more concerned about Elvis than Priscilla herself at this moment in time? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And Marion is asking, do I know what year Priscilla put out the Elvis book that she wrote, Elvis and Me? I think it was, it's early to mid 80s. I don't remember the exact year. I want to say 85. I think Graceland was opened in 82, and the book came out like 2 or 3 years later. Because suddenly there was this big market for it, and there was also a massive sales place where a lot of people were going to come through that could buy a book. And Larry Geller says, later that evening, Elvis called for me and Stevie to come to his room. Stevie is Larry Geller's wife. Now, if Priscilla is there, it makes some sense that Stevie is there as well. I'm not sure. I think Larry is living in California from things that he says right after this. He's living in California, so maybe Stevie is there because they live in California and she's come back with him. But I believe they were also all in Memphis because Elvis was buying Larry Geller's entire family outfits to ride the horse that he bought for Larry. And Larry said that the horse was great for the whole family. So I know Stevie was out in Memphis during that period. But apparently she's here as well. And Larry says that later that evening, Elvis called for me and Stevie to come to his room. He was leaning against some pillows. Stevie and I sat on the edge of the bed. Elvis said, I just want you to know that I love you guys. No matter what happens, I love you. Don't ever forget that. So Larry's saying that after this meeting breaks up, that Elvis sends for him and his wife, and he tells them that no matter what happens, that he loves them. Which seems like he's warning them that something's about to happen. But he doesn't say what it is. And it's also indicating that Elvis was not ostracizing Larry. Elvis did have a way of giving a guy a cold shoulder And then the other members of the group would pick up on that. And Elvis didn't say things like, we're going to throw this guy out, unless things were terrible. But he would get to a point where he either didn't like or distrust a person. If he completely distrusted them, obviously he'd throw them out immediately. But sometimes he would just get a bad feeling about people, or he'd have reason to have a bad feeling, or he would feel like this person no longer fits in correctly. And he would give them a cold shoulder in a manner that the others would recognize as the cold shoulder, although it wasn't a signal that any of them can put into words. They all talk about it in their books, but they don't define exactly how it happens. Elvis would just, this person would fall out of favor. And they would move from the inner circle to the second circle to the third circle and then on out to wherever Elvis felt they needed to be placed, basically, in his mind, I guess. But they would just disappear from the inner circle slowly. But they wouldn't get the call to join in with the activities. You know, they wouldn't be included on some of the plans for something at some point. And many of them at that point understood what was happening, and they wouldn't put up a fight about it. They would just go with the flow because they had seen it happen with others, and you just slowly moved out of the group. So that is what many of them are probably thinking is happening with Larry, and it might be what Larry thinks is happening. And Gunn says if Parker was glad Elvis was an introvert because he read Larry's book, why did he say Elvis was not allowed to read the book, making him an introvert? Right, exactly. So my point there is really that Priscilla Presley is talking for Colonel Parker, but what she's saying doesn't really fit Colonel Parker. And that I just believe it's a cover for the fact that Priscilla herself is the most concerned person about this change. That Colonel Parker doesn't like Larry, and Priscilla knows Colonel Parker doesn't like Larry, but I don't think getting tongue-tied. I don't think that Priscilla knows why Colonel Parker doesn't like Larry. She just knows that he doesn't. And so when she writes this book years later, it's convenient to say that he's the person most concerned, but it's really her because she's the one writing about it in this book years later. And Priscilla says Elvis did not stand up for Larry. No one did. So this does, according to what Priscilla's saying, it does feel like the cold shoulder tactic that he had used in the past and would again in the future to shift people around within the inner circle. But Larry stating that he's been told directly, he and his wife, that they're loved. Which would indicate Elvis is supporting Larry. But Priscilla says from what she saw, Elvis did not stand up for Larry. And neither did anyone else. Makes a lot of sense. None of these guys like Larry. And Priscilla says that later, the colonel told Elvis that he should get Larry out of his life. That Larry used some sort of technique to manipulate his thinking. Elvis argued that this wasn't the case. He was truly interested in his readings. Priscilla's reporting that there is a discussion between Elvis and the Colonel about Larry. And she's referencing these techniques that manipulate his thinking. And that does seem like something that the Colonel would say. Because according to Larry, the Colonel had said things like that to him. Now, I don't know how clever Priscilla is or was when she was writing her book, how many resources that were available to her that she would have used. But Larry had published a book in 1980. And I've never read that particular copy, that print of that book. I believe that Larry used most of the text of that book in the next book, which is the one most people are familiar with. Although I can't remember the name of it exactly. The one with Dream in the title, I believe. So I think that most people who've read one of Larry's books, they've read most of what was in that first book. And maybe this was in there, this section about it. So she may be referencing what Larry himself was saying about the Colonel. The Colonel like invited him into the Snowman's Club, which the Colonel was the high potentate of the Snowman's Club. And a snowman is a salesman who makes whatever his product is more beautiful and mysterious and desirable by sprinkling snow over it. So it softens all the lines and hides any of the flaws and allows the dream of the object, and of the person who's going to purchase the object, their dreams of what it will be like to own the object. And this could be an experience like the carnival experience. He was good at telling a story about the carnival that would, metaphorically throw snow over the carnival, and that would attract people in the town to the carnival. That was one of his original jobs. So he wasn't a con man. He delivered what he promised. He just made it look even better than what he was promising. And then you wanted it more. And he was recognizing Larry as a kindred spirit in that. And he had either joked or insulted Larry, depending on how you want to look at it. And Larry himself's not clear about it. About Larry's ability to influence other people. Kind of like the historical figure Rasputin. It's kind of who the Colonel was comparing Larry to. And Larry kind of leans into that by referencing himself as Swami within his book, saying that the guys would call him Swami. Well, that's what they're referencing. That he's throwing spells on people's minds. And that then he's controlling what they do. And Colonel, according to Larry, did this, and Priscilla's referencing it as well. So you just have to wonder, did that happen? And they're both stating it, and that supports each other. Or is Priscilla using that to support her own arguments within her own book? And she's able to do that because she read it in Larry's book. That's just a question I ask myself. I have no proof of that one way or the other. I just wonder because of the timeline. But Priscilla's telling us that the Colonel wants Larry out of Elvis's life. And it feels to me that she implicitly agrees with that. She also wants Larry out of his life. Billy Smith says, Colonel tried to get rid of some of the guys, but it didn't really have any effect on me. Elvis made the rules and decisions when it came to me and most of the other guys. We were all handpicked by Elvis, and he was very protective of us. Billy is indicating that the Colonel has no actual power over any of the guys without Elvis's consent. According to Billy, Elvis made the rules and decisions. Now, Billy specifies that's when it came to Billy, but he also adds, and most of the other guys. Well, how could it be most of the other guys? Wouldn't it have to be all of the other guys or none of the other guys? It seems odd that Elvis is only able to exercise power over these people that he has handpicked and he's very protective of, but he can only exercise that power over most of the other guys. My belief is he exercises power over all the guys. It's all his decision. Now, whether he was of sound mind when these decisions were made, that could be questioned. But the treatment that goes on with Larry will go on for a month. And Elvis is not suffering from the concussion for the entire month. And during that month, Larry will spend no personal time with Elvis. He will only do his hair, and another one of the guys will always be present. And none of them indicate they were given an order to make that happen. There's a statement that the Colonel put that order into effect, but no one says he told me. And no one says they were told by anybody else. But Larry notices he never gets to spend any private time with Elvis ever again. I think there's an implication there that Elvis could have spent that private time with Larry anytime he wanted to, just by signaling the other guys to leave. So he's not signaling for the other guys to leave. So there's no order given that he's not to be alone with Larry. But there's also no order given to leave me alone with Larry at any point in time. But that's Elvis actively choosing one way or the other. It's not the Colonel. And so there's going to be a pattern of behavior here that's definitely got to be Elvis. And he may be influenced by the Colonel, by Priscilla, but he's ultimately made a decision that he is going to cold shoulder Larry. And I don't know if it's a test of Larry, because he doesn't terminate him. He doesn't tell him to go away. He just leaves things in this limbo, and he spends no personal time with Larry. And Priscilla says, the Colonel shouted at Elvis, "You wouldn't be in this condition if your head was on straight. I'm telling you, Larry's jamming up your mind." So it's possible, according to Priscilla, it happened that the Colonel is raising his voice at Elvis about Larry, that the Colonel is so upset about Larry that he must be furious to be raising his voice at Elvis, because I don't think anybody, I don't remember off the top of my head any stories about the Colonel raising his voice at Elvis. There's stories about the Colonel's temper, but I don't know about one where he directs it at Elvis. I can think of one where he stormed away in some of the stories, but I can't think of one where he directed it at Elvis. But I could be wrong, and I don't know all the Elvis stories. So maybe one's jumping out to you. Feel free to put it in the comments, put it in the chat. But it's unusual. I think it's at least unusual. It's unprofessional. So if the Colonel's shouting at Elvis, he's very upset. And it appears that Priscilla sees this, that she witnesses it, because she's reporting it in her book. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming, for getting up early to join us here. Hillbilly Cat History. Good to see you. Now, on March 12th, which is the same day that one source says, one unverified source says that Vernon flew into Hollywood. That source says Priscilla's on the same plane, but not sure. Don't even know that that source is correct. Right now, because Peter Guralnick, who is the #1 Elvis writer and researcher, and has written a book that actually traces Elvis day to day, he's put a date on the meeting as March 11th. So I think that we are going at this moment with March 11th, Saturday. So the 12th is the following day, which is a Sunday. And another unknown source on the internet, this would be another fan site, and they pulled this fact from somewhere, but they haven't credited the source, so I'm not sure where. It says Larry Geller's house is trashed, and he's forced to leave his house. Now, I've included this here because I remember reading this or hearing it in a documentary once, although I don't remember it being assigned with a date. But since we're doing a deep dive here, I've found this, and it's got a date. And I remember that story. So I'm putting it here, but it doesn't seem to match the timeline. Because Larry doesn't, it's not in Larry's book, at least the one that I'm looking at. And he details when he does leave, and it's like a month and a half later. So I don't know if this is indicating that Larry had to leave that particular apartment, but he continues to work for Elvis, or what's going on with this particular, this specific reference. I don't want to call it a fact, but I'm just putting it here as a placeholder because I remember this story, and I'm sure we're going to find a source on it at some point. And then maybe it really won't be this date. But the thinking is that at some point in time, right around here, Larry's house is entered. And if I remember what the story I remember is that it was trashed, but it looked like it had been searched. Like somebody was searching for something. But it's an old memory, so I don't really know. But what we do know as fact is that on March 15th, let's pull back up our calendar. Here we go. Wednesday, March 15th. So Elvis is in bed on the 11th. They're having the meeting. Should still be in bed on the 15th. Now, this source, it has a for sure fact here, which is that Jerry Schilling married his sweetheart, Sandy Kawolo. I'm sure I butchered that name. It's Kawelo. She was a native Hawaiian. He met her in Hawaii. But Jerry Schilling and Sandy got married in Las Vegas Wednesday, March 15th, 1967. Elvis is not able to attend because he's recuperating from this blow to the head. This source, though, says that Elvis was in Palm Springs. Elvis does have a house in Palm Springs at this time. But that means he would have moved from one house to the other when he should be staying in bed. So I don't know that if he did or he did not. But that's what this particular source said with it. And that brings us to the end of today's episode, of at least the new information part of today's episode. In our next episode, we're going to move completely past the meeting. We're going to move past Jerry Schilling and Sandy's wedding. And we're going to talk about something incredible. Something that really had never been done in radio history. Something that Elvis and the Colonel did together. And I think you guys are going to be amazed by it. And it occurs 4 days after Jerry and Sandy get married and are now Mr. and Mrs. Schilling. Hi, chillin' in Canada. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We're going to go out on a song, and this song's going to be Trust in Motion. And until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. The DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears on shade. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from Klein to the Circle G crew. Gary Pepper wheels instead of rays, rolled the